I came home early from work, expecting the quiet hum of our suburban house. Instead, I walked straight into a nightmare. My wife wasn't alone, she was in our bedroom, kissing someone I had trusted with my life. My heart slammed against my chest. Every breath felt heavy, every thought spinning. I had always believed in her. I had never imagined a betrayal this deep, this personal. And yet, there it was, staring me in the face. Before we continue, subscribe Silken Real Life Revenge. Click the notification bell because we have new stories every single day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The sight froze me in place. Anger and disbelief collided inside me. How long had this been going on? How could she do this in our own home? Every memory of our life together, laughter, late-night talks, shared dreams, now felt like a lie. My son's footsteps creaked on the hallway floor, and I realized he had probably been watching, noticing what I hadn't. The betrayal wasn't just hers, it had become a secret that implicated others, too. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. This wasn't a moment for shouting or confrontation. I needed to understand the depth of this deception, to uncover every hidden truth. I wouldn't just walk away. I wouldn't let this betrayal ruin me. Justice would come, and it would be delivered in a way she never saw coming. The first step was observing, gathering, and planning. I backed out of the room slowly, making sure they didn't notice me. My mind was spinning. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was walking through fog. I needed to think clearly, but all I could feel was the heat of betrayal and the sharp sting of humiliation. How could she do this to me? How could she betray the trust one had given her completely? I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, hands shaking. My son appeared behind me, eyes wide and full of fear. "Dad." "I think I saw everything," he whispered. My chest tightened. My own child had witnessed this horror, and I hadn't even known. The weight of responsibility hit me. I couldn't let anger take over. I had to plan. I had to uncover every secret she had buried. I grabbed my laptop and started scrolling through old messages, looking for any clue. Texts, emails, missed calls, they all painted a picture I didn't want to believe. She had been careful, precise, making sure no one suspected. But I was starting to see the pattern, the careful web of lies she had spun. Every lie was a thread, and I needed to follow each one to the center. I realized this betrayal went deeper than just a fling. Someone else had helped her hide it. Friends, colleagues, maybe even neighbors. Every interaction I had trusted now seemed suspect. The person she had been with wasn't random, it was deliberate. My pulse raced. I had to gather proof, record details, and prepare for the moment the truth would explode. By the time I went to bed that night, my mind was racing. I didn't know how far this went, but I knew one thing, she wouldn't get away with this. Not from me. Not from my son. And when the truth came out, everyone would see exactly who she really was. Why the next morning, I woke up before anyone else. Sleep had eluded me, my mind was tangled in images I wished I could erase. I couldn't stop thinking about her, my wife, the person I had trusted the most, lying with someone I considered a friend. My stomach churned with anger and betrayal, but I knew I couldn't act recklessly. If I wanted justice, I needed patience, observation, and a plan. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, laptop open. Messages from the night before glared at me like confessions carved in stone. I traced her steps, every suspicious call, every deleted text, every secret meeting. Slowly, a pattern emerged. She wasn't just careless, she was methodical. Every lie had a purpose, and every smile she wore in public was a mask. My son came down quietly, eyes red from crying. "Dad, what do we do?" he asked, his voice trembling. I reached across the table and held his hands. "We find out everything," I said. And then we make sure everyone sees the truth. Not just me, not just us, everyone who matters. He nodded, his trust in me shining through the hurt. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. We weren't helpless. I spent the morning following leads, checking phone records, and noting patterns. There were times I felt my anger rising, ready to burst, but I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't just confront her blindly. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to show her that no lie could hide from the truth, and when it came, it would be unstoppable. By midday, I had enough information to start connecting the dots. Each piece of evidence I uncovered revealed more of her deception, and more of the network that had protected her. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated betrayal, and I was determined to dismantle it piece by piece, exposing her for everyone to see. That afternoon, I decided to act carefully. I couldn't confront her without solid proof. I needed her to reveal her own lies, to slip up while I watched. I pretended to go about my work at home, keeping a calm face while my mind raced with plans. Every sound she made, every message she sent, I observed like a hawk. The betrayal had made me hyper-aware, and I wasn't about to let her escape accountability. I set up a discreet recording in the living room. My heart pounded every time she moved, every time her phone buzzed. I could see the way she hid messages from me, the small, calculated gestures to cover her tracks. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I forced myself to remain patient. This wasn't about confrontation yet, it was about proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. By early evening, I had already noticed patterns in her behavior that I hadn't seen before. There were meetings she claimed were for work but weren't, texts that disappeared within minutes, and phone calls she took in private. The pieces were falling into place, and the bigger the picture became, the more I realized how carefully she had orchestrated this betrayal. My son peeked from the hallway. "Dad, she thinks we don't know." His voice was low but resolute. I nodded at him. We didn't just know, we were going to make sure the truth came out in a way that no one could ignore. As night fell, I reviewed all the recordings, texts, and notes I had compiled. Every lie she had told, every secret she had kept, was recorded and documented. I could almost see the web unraveling, each thread of deception exposed to the light. And I knew that when the time came, she wouldn't be able to hide. Karma was coming, and it would strike harder than she could imagine. The next morning, I noticed her phone vibrating constantly. She laughed softly, thinking no one was watching. I stayed hidden in the kitchen, pretending to read a document while my ears caught every word. She was talking to him again, the man I had trusted, the friend I had never suspected. My stomach twisted. Each word they exchanged was another confirmation that my suspicion wasn't paranoia, it was reality. I grabbed a notebook and began writing down everything: times, dates, secret meetings, even the tone of their messages. Every detail mattered. If I wanted justice, I needed to be thorough. Half measures wouldn't work. I couldn't let anger cloud my plan. I had to be precise, calculated. My son came down for breakfast, quiet but watchful. He had sensed the tension and the deception long before I had confronted it. "Dad," he whispered, do we make her pay?" I looked at him, his young face full of both fear and determination. "Yes," I said softly. "But the right way. Not with rage, but with truth. We let her lies destroy themselves." By mid-afternoon, I had traced every secret text, every deleted message, and even found photos that proved the affair had been going on for months. She had been careful, but she underestimated one thing: my attention to detail. I realized she had grown reckless because she believed I was blind. That mistake would be her undoing. That evening, I watched as she left the house, phone in hand, texting without caution. I knew she would make a slip soon, a crack in her carefully constructed mask. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Justice was not yet served, but the path was clear. And when the moment came, the truth would hit like a hammer, exposing her betrayal to everyone who had trusted her. The following day, I watched her every move, careful not to let her know I was paying attention. She had started to grow sloppy, confident that I would never notice. Every glance at her phone, every hushed conversation, was like fuel to the fire burning inside me. I felt the anger simmering, but I kept it locked away, hidden behind calm eyes. Patience was my weapon now. By mid-morning, she made her first big mistake. She left her email logged in on the family computer, assuming I wouldn't check it. I opened it carefully, heart pounding, and found weeks of messages between her and him. Plans, lies, excuses, and secret meetings sprawled across the screen. Each sentence made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain collected. Proof. This was exactly what I needed. My son peeked in, as quiet as a shadow. "Dad, you're going to make her pay, right?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and hope. I knelt down, looking him straight in the eyes. "We'll do it the smart way," I said. "No anger. No rash moves. Just the truth. And when we reveal it, there will be no way for her to hide." His face lit up with a tiny spark of relief. He trusted me to fix what she had broken. I spent the rest of the day organizing every piece of evidence. Photos, texts, call logs, and recordings. I compiled them carefully, building a timeline that no one could dispute. Every lie she told, every secret she kept, was documented. I knew that when the time came, it wouldn't just be about exposing her, it would be about reclaiming the life she had tried to destroy. That night, I sat in silence, staring at the ceiling. The pieces were coming together, the plan was taking shape, and her downfall was closer than she could ever imagine. Justice wasn't just coming, it was inevitable. The next morning, I could feel her tension before she even spoke. Something had shifted. Her movements were jittery, her eyes darting toward me whenever I walked by. I stayed calm, letting her unravel on her own. Patience was my ally, and I could see the cracks forming in the mask she had worn so flawlessly for months. She was on the phone in the living room, whispering hurriedly, assuming I wasn't listening. Every word that slipped out was another thread unraveling her lies. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice quiet as I asked, "Who are you talking to?" She jumped, startled, but quickly composed herself, pretending it was nothing. That fake composure only confirmed my suspicion. She knew the walls were closing in. Later that day, I arranged a casual family dinner, inviting a few friends who had been around during the affair. I wanted her to feel normal, to slip into the false sense of security that she could maintain her lies. She smiled, trying to act casual, but I could see her fingers trembling as she passed the salt. Every gesture betrayed her anxiety. I spent the evening subtly checking her phone, her emails, and her messages, making mental notes of every suspicious detail. She had become predictable now, almost careless. Each lie she told, each half-truth she offered, was like handing me the tools I needed for the final reveal. By the time she went to bed, I had pieced together a nearly complete picture of her betrayal. I realized one thing with chilling clarity: she had been playing a dangerous game, thinking she could manipulate everyone, including me. But the longer she tried to hide, the more obvious her deception became. And when the moment of exposure came, it wouldn't just be shocking, it would be undeniable, leaving no room for excuses. The next day, I decided it was time to push her just a little. I casually mentioned a friend visiting later in the week, someone she had secretly confided in about the affair. Her reaction was subtle at first, just a flicker of panic in her eyes, but I noticed it immediately. She was sweating, shifting nervously, and her smile didn't reach her eyes. Every twitch was a sign she knew her web of lies was beginning to unravel. That afternoon, she stepped out for a quick errand, and I took the opportunity to check her messages one more time. What I found made my blood run cold, and yet, oddly satisfying. There were new texts, deleted quickly, with timestamps that revealed her secret meetings were still ongoing. She hadn't learned her lesson. She thought she was untouchable. But now, I had proof that was impossible to deny. When she returned, I played it cool. I asked about her day in the calmest voice I could muster. She hesitated, then forced a laugh. But every word she said felt hollow. I could feel the tension crackling in the room, and I knew the longer I waited, the more desperate she would become. Later that evening, a friend stopped by unexpectedly. She greeted them warmly, laughing as if nothing had happened. But as I excused myself to the kitchen, I overheard her voice drop in panic, muttering to her phone, "He knows everything. I can't let him find out." I froze. That was it. She had said it herself. She knew the truth was close, and the fear in her voice was deliciously satisfying. I retreated to my office and began laying out the timeline, arranging evidence, and planning the moment when all of this would explode. The pieces were falling perfectly into place. Soon, everyone would see her for who she really was. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be a revelation, it would be justice. The weekend arrived, and she invited a few neighbors over for coffee, pretending everything was normal. I agreed to stay in the living room, reading a magazine, while observing every gesture, every glance. I didn't need to confront her yet, the truth was about to come out on its own. She laughed and joked, carefully masking the anxiety I could see behind her eyes. I noticed the subtle shaking of her hands as she poured coffee, the way she kept checking her phone under the table. Every movement betrayed her. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Her carefully constructed illusion was beginning to crack, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Then, it happened. One of the neighbors mentioned a mutual friend, the same friend she had confided in about her secret affair. Her face paled, and she choked slightly on her laughter. I couldn't help but smirk. That little slip confirmed everything I had suspected. My wife wasn't as careful as she thought. The more she tried to maintain control, the more obvious her deception became. I quietly reached for my phone and discreetly recorded the conversation, making sure to capture every word. This would be part of the proof I needed for the moment of exposure. Every lie she had told, every secret she had tried to hide, was now documented. By the time the neighbors left, she was pale and silent, avoiding eye contact with me. I felt a rush of anticipation. The cracks were widening, and soon, they would turn into a full collapse. She had no idea how close she was to being exposed, and the truth would hit her harder than she could ever imagine. That night, as I reviewed the recordings, I realized the moment for confrontation was approaching. Every careful plan, every observation, had led to this point. Justice was no longer a distant thought, it was imminent, and it would be inevitable. By Monday, her panic was becoming obvious even when she was alone. I noticed it first thing in the morning. She rushed through breakfast, spilling coffee and muttering under her breath. Every clumsy movement screamed guilt, and I felt a thrill of anticipation. The more careless she became, the closer the moment of truth drew. I spent the morning reviewing my evidence again. Photos, recordings, messages, they were all lined up perfectly. I didn't need to confront her immediately. I needed her to dig her own grave with her words, her actions, her mistakes. And judging by her nervous energy, she was well on her way. That afternoon, she took a call in the kitchen and forgot to put the phone on speaker or hide it. I pretended to be absorbed in a document while listening carefully. Her voice trembled as she lied about where she had been, who she had seen, and what she had done. Every word contradicted the evidence I already had. My pulse raced. This was exactly what I needed. My son watched silently from the hallway, his expression a mix of fear and hope. He had started to understand that I wasn't just gathering proof for myself. I was doing it for both of us, for our dignity, for the life she had tried to destroy. He nodded slightly as I whispered, "We're ready, but we wait. Timing is everything." By evening, I could see she was losing control. Small mistakes became bigger, lies tangled, and her attempts to cover them only made them more obvious. I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that soon, everyone would see the real her. She had underestimated me, underestimated the depth of my observation and patience. When the truth finally came out, it would be undeniable, and her carefully constructed life would crumble. By midweek, I knew she was cracking. Her composure, once flawless, was now fragile. Every glance she gave me carried suspicion, fear, and guilt. I kept my own face calm, pretending I was oblivious, but inside, I was ready. The moment of confrontation was approaching, and I wanted it to hit with maximum impact. That evening, I invited her to sit down with me in the living room, casually, as if nothing had changed. I noticed her posture stiffen instantly. Her eyes flicked to the recordings on my laptop. She didn't know I had set them up to be visible without touching them. My pulse quickened. The trap was set. "Can we talk?" I asked softly, keeping my voice steady. She nodded hesitantly, sensing that something was different this time. She tried to mask her fear with a weak smile, but it didn't fool me. Every lie she had told, every secret she had hidden, was now laid bare before me. I opened the first recording, letting it play aloud. Her face went pale as she realized her words, her confessions, were now public, undeniable. Her carefully constructed lies unraveled in real time. I watched the panic spread across her features, knowing she understood that her deception could no longer be hidden. My son appeared behind her quietly, watching the scene unfold. I could see the mix of shock and relief on his face. He had wanted justice, and now it was coming. Every betrayal, every moment of manipulation, was being exposed. She stammered, trying to explain, trying to reclaim some control, but it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. The lies, the deceit, the betrayal, all of it collapsed under the weight of truth. And as I watched her panic, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Justice was here, and it had been inevitable. Her voice shook as she tried to explain herself, fumbling over every word. "It's not what you think," she stammered, but I had heard it all before, her lies, her excuses, her manipulations. Each word only confirmed how deeply she had betrayed me. The calm I had maintained all week began to crack, replaced by a sharp edge of determination. I played another recording, this one capturing her arranging secret meetings and plotting behind my back. She froze, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing as if searching for a lifeline. But there was none. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the inevitability of the truth settling like a shadow she could no longer escape. My son stood silently behind me, his expression tense but resolute. I saw the trust in his eyes, the knowledge that I had fought for justice not only for myself but for him as well. He had been hurt by her actions too, and now, the scales were beginning to tip. She tried to interrupt, to shift blame, but the recordings, the messages, and the texts all spoke louder than her frantic words. Every attempt to cover up or twist the truth fell apart in real time. Her pride, her carefully maintained facade, was crumbling before our eyes. I felt a grim satisfaction as I watched her struggle. She had thought she could manipulate me, control the narrative, and continue her double life undetected. But her own arrogance had blinded her. Each lie she had told, every secret she had kept, had become a weapon against her. By the end of the night, she was exhausted, drained, and utterly defeated. The confrontation had stripped away every pretense, leaving her exposed and powerless. And as I closed my laptop, I knew this was only the beginning. The full extent of justice had yet to unfold. The next morning, I decided it was time to take things public, but carefully. I invited a few close friends and neighbors over under the guise of a casual brunch. She walked in, trying to act normal, but I could see the tension radiating off her. Her laughter was forced, her smiles hollow. As everyone settled, I casually placed my laptop on the table, still open to the recordings. She noticed immediately, her eyes flicking toward the screen. I kept my expression neutral, pretending to scroll through emails, while the room remained calm, deceptively calm. Then, I hit play. Her voice filled the room, captured in perfect clarity. The secrets, the lies, the planning, all laid bare for everyone to hear. Her hand flew to her mouth, and I saw her jaw tighten. She had tried to hide, but now there was no escape. Friends looked at her in shock, their faces a mix of disbelief and outrage. I could feel the tension in the room spike, thick and suffocating. My son stood beside me, quietly observing, his eyes wide with both fear and satisfaction. He knew this moment was necessary. The betrayal wasn't just mine, it affected everyone she had manipulated. Her eyes darted around the room, silently pleading, but the evidence spoke louder than her panic. I saw her pride, her carefully constructed image, crumble in real time. Every lie she had told, every betrayal, was now visible to the world. The room was silent except for the voice on the recording. When it ended, I looked at everyone and calmly said, "The truth doesn't need defending. It speaks for itself." I saw the mix of shock and understanding wash over the guests. She couldn't hide anymore. Justice wasn't just coming, it was standing right there, undeniable and complete. By the next day, word had spread faster than I anticipated. Friends who had been at the brunch called, some expressing shock, others offering support. Her social circle had started whispering behind her back, and I could see the fear in her eyes growing. The carefully curated image she had spent years building was crumbling in real time. She tried to call me, her voice shaking with desperation. "Please, you don't understand, it's not what it looks like," she begged. I stayed calm, letting her words hang in the air like a fragile thread. The truth was already out, and no amount of pleading could fix it. Every call, every message, only made her desperation more obvious. By mid-morning, neighbors began stopping by, not confrontationally, but with pointed questions. "We heard, is it true?" they asked. She fumbled, stammered, and contradicted herself at every turn. Each mistake she made widened the gap between her lies and the truth. I watched from the kitchen, a quiet observer of the storm she had created. My son stayed close, his eyes reflecting both anxiety and relief. He understood what this moment meant, not just exposure, but closure. "Dad, she can't hide anymore," he whispered. I nodded, my hand resting on his shoulder. "No, she can't. Justice is finally catching up." By evening, the reality had fully set in. Her professional contacts were questioning her reliability, her friends were keeping their distance, and she had no way to repair her reputation. I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that every piece of deception she had spun was now unraveling. The night fell, and she sat alone in the living room, defeated and silent. I looked at her, a mix of pity and resolution in my eyes. The battle had not yet ended, but the first wave of justice had landed. And soon, the final reckoning would follow, absolute, undeniable, and deserved. By midweek, her work life began to crumble just as fast as her personal life. Emails from colleagues questioned her integrity, and even her closest associates hesitated to take her calls. She had always relied on her charm and connections, but now, every door she had counted on was slowly closing. I stayed out of her professional world directly, letting her mistakes speak for themselves. The recordings, the messages, and the documented lies I had collected were circulating quietly among the right people. The whispers turned into questions, and questions into doubts. She realized too late that her carefully maintained reputation had become a fragile facade, ready to shatter. One afternoon, she called me, her voice trembling, a mix of panic and pleading. "Please. I can fix this. I can explain." But I remained calm, almost detached. I didn't answer her immediately. Let her stew. Let the reality of her actions sink in. She had spent years manipulating, lying, and betraying, and now the consequences were catching up. My son watched silently as she paced back and forth, her face pale, her hands shaking. "Dad, she's losing everything," he said quietly. I nodded. "Yes, and she deserves every moment of it." He looked relieved, but also a little afraid. This wasn't just a lesson for her, it was a reminder of how powerful truth could be when paired with patience and planning. By evening, I noticed she had stopped checking her phone as obsessively. The fear had settled into resignation. She had no way to control the narrative anymore, her lies were exposed, her deceit laid bare. The professional blow she had feared had landed, and the social fallout only intensified her isolation. I sat back in my chair, letting it all sink in. Justice wasn't instantaneous, but it was inevitable. And when the final confrontation came, she would understand fully the cost of her betrayal. Every lie, every secret, every act of deceit had led her to this moment. By Thursday, the situation had reached a tipping point. Her actions weren't just affecting friends and family anymore, they were beginning to have public consequences. A professional contact had forwarded evidence of her deceit to others in her network, and whispers were turning into a chorus of disbelief. The truth had become unstoppable. She sat in the living room when I returned from work, pale and rigid. Her phone buzzed constantly, notifications of messages she couldn't answer without exposing herself further. I didn't speak. I let her panic play out, knowing the impact would be far greater if I remained silent. Then, an email arrived on our shared account. It was from her employer's HR department, politely but firmly requesting clarification regarding discrepancies in her recent conduct. Her eyes widened, and I watched as the color drained from her face. She had always counted on charm and manipulation, but now, formal scrutiny was coming for her. My son peeked around the corner, a mix of fear and anticipation in his eyes. "Dad, she's really in trouble now," he whispered. I nodded slowly. "Yes, and it's long overdue. This is the moment she's been avoiding her whole life." She grabbed her phone, trembling, typing and deleting messages in a frenzy. The more she tried to control the situation, the more it slipped from her grasp. Every attempt to explain, excuse, or redirect was failing. The evidence was too strong, the truth too clear. By evening, she had retreated to the bedroom, phone in hand, staring blankly at the screen. The public exposure, professional scrutiny, and personal collapse were all converging, leaving her trapped in the consequences of her own choices. Justice wasn't just a concept anymore, it was tangible, closing in with every heartbeat. And as I watched, I realized the final reckoning was almost here. Soon, she would have no lies left to tell, no defenses left to raise, and no control over the chaos she had created. By Friday, she was a whirlwind of desperation. Every phone call, every message, every attempt to manipulate someone into believing her version of events failed miserably. I watched from a distance as she tried to spin lies, but the web of truth I had woven made it impossible for her to escape. She barged into my office that morning, her eyes wild, voice trembling. "You can't do this to me. I can explain everything," she yelled. I remained seated, calm and unflinching. The power she once held over me was gone, and I let her realize it herself. Every shout, every plea only highlighted her guilt. My son watched silently, both anxious and relieved. He had begun to understand the depth of her betrayal and the justice we were about to serve. "Dad, she's losing it," he whispered. I nodded. "Yes. And it's exactly where she deserves to be." She grabbed papers, documents, even our shared files, attempting to hide or destroy evidence, but it was too late. I had duplicates, recordings, screenshots, proof that could never be erased. Each desperate action she took only exposed her further. I could see it in her face, in her trembling hands, in the way her voice faltered mid-argument. By evening, she had retreated to the living room, phone in hand, frantically trying to salvage what was left of her reputation. She was trapped in a cage of her own making, every lie, every secret, every betrayal coming back to haunt her. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small, controlled smile. Justice was no longer theoretical, it was visible, undeniable, and imminent. The final act was approaching, and when it came, it would leave no doubt about the consequences of her choices. Her downfall wasn't just coming, it was inevitable, and I would ensure it was complete. Saturday morning, I decided it was time. The confrontation wouldn't wait any longer. She had exhausted every possible lie, every desperate manipulation. Everyone who mattered, the neighbors, friends, and even some professional contacts, needed to see the truth. The moment had to be undeniable. I asked her to join me in the living room, pretending it was just another discussion. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, and her hands shook. She tried to maintain a mask of calm, but I could see it cracking. The panic behind her eyes was unmistakable. I kept my own voice steady, calm, and cold. "Sit," I said, pointing to the chair across from me. She obeyed hesitantly, as if she knew something inevitable was about to happen. I reached for my laptop and hit play. The room filled with her own words, the secrets, the plotting, the betrayals, captured perfectly. Her jaw dropped, her hands flew to her mouth. The neighbors, who had gathered under the guise of a casual brunch, stared in shock. My son stood beside me, tense but resolute, watching as the woman he had once looked up to was revealed in her true form. The silence was deafening. Every lie, every betrayal, every act of deception was now undeniable. She tried to speak, to deny, to redirect, but it was too late. The recordings, messages, and evidence made her words meaningless. I felt a grim satisfaction watching her struggle. Every plan she had crafted to deceive me, to manipulate our lives, was collapsing. By the time it ended, her face was pale, drained, and hollow. The power she had wielded for so long was gone. The truth had been delivered in full, unfiltered, and inescapable. I sat back, letting the silence settle, knowing the moment of reckoning had arrived. Justice wasn't just coming, it was already here, undeniable and complete. By Sunday morning, the consequences of the confrontation had begun to ripple outward. Friends and neighbors who had witnessed the truth quietly discussed what they had seen, and word spread through our community like wildfire. She could no longer hide, no longer manipulate, no longer pretend. She paced the living room, phone in hand, checking messages with growing panic. Each notification seemed to confirm her worst fears, whispers of betrayal, expressions of disbelief, and the slow collapse of the life she had meticulously curated. She realized that her social standing, her professional image, and her carefully maintained pride were all crumbling at once. My son stood quietly beside me, observing. "Dad, it's really over for her," he said softly. I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and calm relief. He had seen firsthand what deception and betrayal could do, and now he could witness justice in its purest form. She tried to salvage what she could by reaching out to friends and colleagues, spinning stories, apologizing, and even begging for understanding. But it was all too late. Everyone who mattered had already seen the truth, and even the most sympathetic listeners couldn't ignore the evidence. I watched her slowly sink into silence, her frantic energy replaced by resignation. The confrontation had stripped away every pretense, leaving her exposed and powerless. The truth had not only won, it had dominated. By evening, she sat quietly in the living room, staring at the floor. I could see the weight of her guilt pressing down on her, heavier than any words could describe. Justice had arrived, and she was powerless to resist it. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that every plan she had made to deceive, manipulate, and control had backfired completely. And as I looked at my son, I realized this was more than just a personal victory, it was a lesson in truth, patience, and the inescapable power of justice. By Monday, the full weight of her downfall had hit. Colleagues who once respected her were avoiding her calls. Invitations she had taken for granted no longer arrived. Even neighbors, who had smiled and waved just days before, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and judgment. She was alone in a world she had once tried to control. She tried to regain footing, sending emails to friends and professional contacts, but the damage was irreversible. I watched quietly as she typed, deleted, and retyped messages, her frustration growing with every failed attempt. Every word she sent seemed only to confirm the image of a woman caught in her own web of deceit. My son, still by my side, couldn't help but glance at her occasionally. "Dad, she's losing everything," he whispered. I nodded. "Yes. And it's exactly what she deserves." He looked relieved but also contemplative, seeing firsthand how betrayal could destroy even the most carefully maintained facade. By evening, she had stopped checking her phone altogether. Her attempts to salvage reputation and relationships had failed, and the reality of her isolation had begun to sink in. She was trapped in a world she had built on lies, now facing the consequences of every choice she had made. I felt a quiet satisfaction watching the transformation. The power she had once wielded was gone. Every act of manipulation, every secret, every betrayal had returned to her, amplified by her own arrogance. Justice was no longer a distant concept, it was tangible, visible, and undeniable. As night fell, she sat alone in the dim light of the living room, silent and defeated. And in that silence, I realized the final act of reckoning was near, the conclusion of a story where every betrayal had been accounted for and justice had been served fully and unmistakably. Tuesday morning, I knew it was time for the final confrontation. She had nowhere left to hide, no lies left to tell, and no control over the chaos she had created. I called her into the living room one last time, my voice calm but firm. She walked in cautiously, eyes darting around, searching for any escape. "Please, we can talk," she whispered, desperation barely masked by false calm. I stayed silent, letting the tension build. This wasn't about conversation, it was about truth, accountability, and justice. I gestured toward the laptop still open on the table. All the evidence we had gathered, the recordings, messages, and secret plans, was displayed. Her eyes widened, the weight of inevitability sinking in. She had tried to manipulate her way out of every situation, but now every deceit, every betrayal, was laid bare. I saw her panic spike as she realized she could no longer spin her web. "Please, don't ruin me," she begged. I shook my head slowly. "You ruined yourself. Everything you built on lies is collapsing. And now, the truth is standing right in front of you." My son stood beside me, silent but steady, witnessing the moment his mother's betrayal met its consequences. He had learned a powerful lesson: betrayal can't hide forever, and truth always finds its way. By the end of our conversation, she was pale, drained, and defeated. The arrogance that had carried her for years was gone, replaced by a crushing awareness of the consequences of her choices. I felt a quiet sense of closure. Justice had been served, perfectly and completely. As I watched her slink away into the quiet of our home, I realized that some lessons can only be taught through truth and consequence. And in this case, the lesson was unavoidable, undeniable, and unforgettable. By Wednesday, she had tried everything one last time: apologies, excuses, and even promises of change, but no one was listening anymore. Her friends and colleagues had all seen the truth. The community had witnessed her manipulations firsthand. Every attempt to regain control only made her look weaker, more desperate. She came into my office, hands trembling, voice barely a whisper. "Please. I can fix this. I'll do anything," she said. But her words rang hollow. The damage was permanent, and she could feel it in every skeptical glance, every hesitant step of those around her. My son watched silently as she paced, her desperation now tinged with panic. "Dad, she's trying everything," he whispered. I nodded. "Yes, and it's too late. She can't undo what's been done. She picked up the evidence I had carefully laid out, a stack of recordings, messages, and photographs, and tried to hide it, destroy it, or spin it. But I had backups everywhere, every detail securely documented. Nothing she did could reverse what had already been exposed. By evening, she sank into the living room chair, defeated, silent, and exhausted. The power she had once wielded over everyone, including me, was gone. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal had returned to her tenfold. I watched quietly, feeling the quiet satisfaction that comes from seeing justice fully realized. My son finally spoke, softly but with clarity. "Dad, it's really over." I smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Yes, son. The lesson is clear, betrayal can't hide forever, and truth always finds a way." As I looked at her, silent and broken, I knew this was the end. The story of deceit, betrayal, and manipulation had reached its conclusion. Justice had been served fully, and the consequences of her actions were undeniable, leaving no room for escape. By Thursday, the aftermath of the confrontation had settled over our household like a quiet storm. Her reputation was in ruins, her friends and colleagues had distanced themselves, and the whispers of betrayal had become undeniable facts. I could see the weight of it in her eyes, exhaustion, regret, and shame all mixed into one. My son and I spent the morning talking quietly, reflecting on everything that had happened. "Dad, I didn't realize how much deception could hurt someone until now," he admitted, his voice low. I nodded. "Yes, son. And it's why truth is so powerful. It can't be hidden, it can't be ignored, and it always finds a way to reveal itself." She avoided our eyes, sitting silently in the corner, her phone untouched. Every attempt she had made to manipulate the situation had failed. Her pride had been broken, and the consequences of her choices were now clear to everyone, including herself. I walked around the house, observing the calm that had replaced the chaos of the past week. Justice had arrived, not with violence or revenge in the traditional sense, but through exposure, truth, and accountability. The moment felt quiet, almost sacred, a lesson carved into reality for all of us to see. By evening, she had retreated to her room, alone and contemplative. The weight of her actions had left her powerless, and for the first time, I saw her truly understand the consequences of her deceit. My son and I shared a brief, knowing glance. We had witnessed justice unfold naturally, and it was complete. Sitting quietly, I realized something important: life always finds a balance. Deceit and betrayal may rise temporarily, but truth and accountability are inevitable. The lesson was clear, the consequence undeniable, and the closure absolute. By Friday, our home felt different, lighter, calmer, almost as if the weight of deception had lifted entirely. My son and I moved through our day with a quiet sense of relief, knowing the chaos she had caused was behind us. Life had regained a rhythm, one based on honesty and respect, not manipulation and lies. She, on the other hand, remained isolated. Friends who had once flattered her now avoided her calls. Colleagues who had respected her no longer trusted her. Every door she had relied on had closed, and the world outside our home reflected the truth of her actions. I noticed her sitting in the living room one last time, her eyes hollow and defeated. She didn't try to reach out, didn't attempt to explain herself, she simply acknowledged, silently, the full weight of her choices. Every betrayal, every lie, every act of manipulation had returned to her in full force. My son came over, leaning slightly on the table. "Dad, it's like she's completely broken," he said softly. I nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Yes. And that's the power of truth. It's not cruel, it's just inevitable. She made her choices, and now she lives with them." I spent the evening reflecting on everything that had transpired. The confrontation, the exposure, the collapse of her social and professional world, it was all a testament to the unstoppable force of truth. Justice had been served not with anger or revenge, but with patience, strategy, and undeniable evidence. As night fell, I finally felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. The lesson was clear: deceit and betrayal can never escape accountability. And as I watched my son settle in, I knew he had learned it too. Life could be unfair, but honesty, patience, and courage always prevail in the end. Saturday morning, the house felt quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months. The storm of lies, betrayal, and chaos had passed, leaving clarity and justice in its wake. My son and I shared a cup of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, reflecting on everything that had happened. "She's completely gone from our lives now," my son said softly, staring out the window. I nodded. "Yes. And that's the way it should be. Every choice has a consequence, and she's living with hers fully. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it always comes." I thought about the past weeks, the confrontation, the evidence, the unraveling of her lies. Every step had been deliberate, measured, and designed to reveal the truth. Watching her face the undeniable consequences of her actions had been difficult, yet necessary. I had wanted justice, not cruelty, and in the end, truth had done the work for me. She had retreated completely, her world shrunk to the smallest corners of her own making. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, even family, those who mattered, had all turned away. Every door she had counted on was closed, and every lie had returned to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. I placed a hand on my son's shoulder, feeling pride and relief at the lesson he had witnessed firsthand. Betrayal hurts, manipulation corrupts, but patience, courage, and truth can conquer anything. By midday, I walked through our home, observing the calm that had replaced tension, the trust that had replaced fear. Life could now move forward without the weight of deception. Justice had been served, fully and undeniably, leaving us with a lesson etched into reality: deceit may rise temporarily, but truth always prevails, and those who betray eventually face the consequences. As the sunlight filled the kitchen, I realized the story wasn't just about punishment, it was about learning, accountability, and the unstoppable power of truth. And in that clarity, we finally found peace.